Coming. Our next session is called State-of-the-Art AI and ML Platforms, where we also have Ashton here as part of this session. And she's actually a really talented artist. And she's going to be actually drawing some of the concepts and some of the questions that come up, as well as some of the insights that we discussed during this conversation. And what comes out in the end is really fascinating. So you'll be able to see some of that as well. For this session, we have two AI and ML leaders from iconic companies, very different companies in terms of their stages, in terms of what they do. I'll actually let them introduce themselves. Let's start with Reza from Instacart, and then move on to Datong from Yahoo. Thank you both for attending, and yeah, would love to hear a little bit about what you do, as well as a little bit about your company's philosophy in terms of AI and ML platforms.
Yeah, so Reza Sadri. So I lead the machine learning infrastructure at Instacart, and that's a fairly new task. So I've been there for a little bit over a year, and if you know about Instacart, you know that it's been growing very, very rapidly, and at the same time, it has many different types of applications. So Instacart is basically a combination of different types of business models. It has a front end, e-commerce, and then it has a gig economy on the back end. It has a lot of relationship with large enterprises, which are mostly retailers and large grocery stores. And also it has an ad business. So basically my job has been to build a infrastructure that can accommodate all these different types of applications. So without being too specific to into one of it. So that has been my job, to basically build the infrastructure that can accommodate diverse set of AI that used to be done in isolation. So like the fulfillment team, they would do their own, and then ads their own. So bring them together, build a more horizontal infrastructure that can work with all of those. Yeah. Anything? Yeah.
Datong, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Datong Chen, Senior Director of Applied Machine Learning and Data Science at Yahoo. My job is actually helping Yahoo to improve their ad technology using machine learning technologies. We actually serve for advertisers when advertiser comes with Yahoo launching their ads campaigns. We're helping them to understand the Yahoo audiences. So there will be hundreds of millions audiences available at Yahoo every day. We also help the advertisers to understand what the contextual, exact contextual and the best contextual they should show their ads to. So we collect lots of data from audience or the users, and also whatever the page and apps are actually visited by individual users, and helping the advertiser understand what's going on, what type of users are they, and what type of contextuals, and matching them with their ads campaigns, helping them to improve their ROI, which is the return of investment. Where we actually using a lot of machine learning technologies, starting from 2007. I think Yahoo being invested on the machine learning technologies for almost more than 10 years, 15 years around. So we start from scratch, introducing the concept to see if the machine learning is a new type of technologies for industry. As long as Yahoo is collecting a massive amount of data every day, we see, okay, there must be some values hidden in the data. Can we leverage them? I think that's the original purpose to introducing machine learning technologies to the industry. Later, we found out there was many requirements coming from advertisers asking us to find the right audience for them and to find the right content for them, which is a little bit way off because of the amount of data we're facing today. There's very difficult for a human being to go through this data and figure out what's the pattern, what's the matching among them. That's where we can start. So the concept proves by real applications one by one. Until today, after 15 years, it's being massively used across the entire company. So everybody believes machine learning technology, and somehow we can call them AI, but the majority is more machine learning, is definitely helpful. It's not a replacer for human being, it's a helper for human being. Extend your hands, your legs, your brains to more and more data which you cannot read by yourself.
Perfect. So thank you both for that introduction, as well as like a little bit of an introduction on your companies. Clearly, Yahoo's been around for a long time, lots of data. Advertising is a place where you're getting tons and tons of throughput. Instacart, of course, the new kid on the block, growing rapidly. What we've seen when, and just for everybody in the audience, if you guys already don't know me, I'm the CEO, co-founder of Abacus.AI, which is also an AI ML platform meant for organizations of all sizes, both small and big. And what I'd like to talk about a little bit, after this introduction is kind of how both of your companies approach platforms in general, especially in the machine learning space. Let me set that up a little. So when we talk to various different companies or our customers, different people think about machine learning and AI a little bit differently. There are some customers who believe that, hey, you should get your data scientists to go build your models, their models, completely decentralized, have them do what makes sense, because different models need different types of infrastructure, and then kind of build kind of small teams, satellite teams almost, around each of those data scientists or data science teams. And you basically take, for example, things like search versus recommendations versus ad tech. And in some ways, I believe Yahoo is a little bit like that. There is no huge centralized platform on which everything works. Maybe Datong can correct me if I'm wrong, but Google is a lot like that. For example, you have like the search team and the YouTube team and somebody else, and they all work a little bit separately and differently. And then there's another class of enterprise which believes that you need to have a common kind of machine learning platform or a system. And the classic example of that actually is a more modern company like Uber. When you look at Uber, they have a very a platform called Michelangelo, very much kind of across the board. Thousands, I think at the moment, 2,000 or 3,000 data scientists use that platform. So they're much more kind of like horizontal platform. So my question for you, and I guess we start with Reza, because this is probably the question that he's debating a lot, is how are you thinking about platforms? Should there be 3 or 4 in a company of your size? Should it be a common platform which you're building for various different AI ML use cases across your company? I would love some of your insights on that.
That's actually a very, very good question and very relevant to what I do, as you mentioned, because that's exactly the situation. So the situation, like the de facto situation, is that there is a lot of islands. There is a lot of platforms, because the way that a company like Instacart grows is like basically like people have to get something done, they get it done. But then at some point you need to step back and see how can you find the common denominators, and then establish some kind of baseline that then you can build these other more customized pieces on top of that. So at the end of the day, you end up with a more you end up with a system that is a combination of both. So you find the common denominators. So basically, like you build a feature store, and then the features from all these different things comes to this feature store, and then everyone can access it. You build a system that allows a generic model that can be served or trained. But then at some point at the higher level, sometimes you need to tweak that and customize it to fit, like, for example, the fulfillment team or the search team differently. So basically this is a hybrid model. The most important part of it is to identifying this underlying common denominator operations, and then building on top of that, the way that you do software engineering, same way you build infrastructure.
So common, kind of base level parts, but then have a lot of customization.
Yes. So for example, for example, workflow management, feature engineering pipeline, feature storage and retrieval. These are very common abstractions that you can build, and then on top of that, you can customize.
Datong, what has Yahoo's approach been?
Well, I think everything new comes in, there's a period of time which is being introduced to the people. So when the machine learning just come to Yahoo, it's definitely coming from the application side. Okay. So that's why when you said there was many islands or satellite type of style, which is application driven for sure. So the smart team working for a very dedicated application, they probably cannot really talk to other teams because they don't know who to talk, especially when the company is big, and they don't know what knowledge they can actually leverage. We call them the stone age of machine learning. So because everybody's work by themselves, it's almost like a small stores. You just open everything, you manufacture something by yourself, and you sell things by yourself. But after many this kind of satellites, this kind of teams working in the company, we start realize, okay, looks like there was around hundreds of teams reading the same data every day. Is that possible? You guys just read them once and just produce whatever you need, and then start separating your task from somewhere which is higher than the raw data. It's a cost issue, right? So everyone is using machine learning models, but there is a hardware cost. There's data AI cost. Can we save something from there? Yep. So we're starting moving from the Stone Age without any tools to this engineering, which is called machine learning engineering procedures. See, hey, we start building a huge building, right? We're not just build your own house. Shall we work together to make sure we have some middle layers, share some of the data registration, feature factories, where everybody can actually register feature extraction knowledge into that factory? Then the features will be automatically extracted and served for anybody, which is actually any teams which is actually needed. So that's where we actually started, start from building feature factory and then some level of feature stores. We're still not perfect develop the machine learning platforms, but definitely this application-driven direction, driven the entire company thinking about our better platform or the middle layer to support the entire enterprise for all the activity, ML-related activity, including training, data collections, feature generation, and feature sharing, and also the model deployment.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's good. I mean, both of you talked a little bit about feature stores, and I think the point is that, almost all organizations are gravitating towards a base level machine learning platform. There is data wrangling, data processing, data cleaning that really nobody wants to do 100 times over. And you want to centralize in some way, shape or form. For example, with Abacus, what we've done is we have a feature store, but we also have some key components that you just talked about, Datong, things like model deployment, model hosting, drift, kind of the end to end. And so what I'd like to talk about a little bit is, and this is kind of like on Twitter nowadays, that's the only thing that people talk about in some ways. It is like it takes 10% of your time to build your machine learning model, but 90% is the productionization, right? Kind of like actually making sure everything works correctly, the retraining works, the models are getting monitored. But in an ideal world, if you think about it, you would actually want to reverse that. You want to spend most of your time building your model, and you should be able to click 3 or 4 links or like do a little bit of configuration and productionize your model, because the intelligence is in the model aspect. Yes, there is data wrangling, but if we can reuse it, that's even better. So I wanted to hear your opinions on that. So Reza, how do you think about kind of new modules? So let's assume that you suddenly are building a big deep learning system. You want to create a nearest neighbor index. How do you think about new modules on an ongoing basis? What's your strategy there? And 2, kind of what is the North Star? Like, is there something where you say, hey, in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, what inside your organization, where people can productionize in a smaller amount of time than actually than developing the model? So it's actually 10% productionization and 90% building. Do you think we'll get there?
Yeah. So basically, so the way that we bring these new modules, which we do pretty much every day, because of for many reasons. If you look at the dynamics of Instacart, our data size is growing very fast. The type of models that we deploy grows very rapidly, and then the number of models also. So there is like this combinatorial growth in the size of ML, and then there's a lot of new use cases and new applications because of basically the innovativeness of the whole business model. There's a lot of things that hasn't been done before, and then we are potentially able to do that, but we do require a lot of infrastructure and processes to do that. And so like this things that you mentioned, like nearest neighbor, these are actually things that we continuously are working, and then there's new applications for it, and we have to deploy those. Now, the way that we go about it, first of all, we try to find what exists in the market. So we definitely want to make sure if there is something that we can leverage, we don't reinvent it. So that's really, so in this build versus buy situation, we always want to buy, not to build. However, because of the rapid pace of our involvement, and also because of a lot of this new, the market is new, the companies that are working on it is new. So a lot of tools that are out there are not really mature enough. They're like they address a subset of the problem. They may work with this subset of the underlying databases or systems that we use internally. So they may cause overhead. So for those reasons, sometimes we need to build, or we need to build like some kind of a wrapper layer or things like that to allow us get to market very fast, to allow us adopt those existing solutions out there. And then absolutely. So our main metric for success is how long it takes MLE to train a model and put it in production. That's basically the main metrics that we go by. And obviously we have had quite a bit of success in that, but we are still far from what we think is achievable. At the same time, because the field is very dynamic, it's kind of you're chasing something that is moving, that end goal is also running away because, there are new models and there are new ways of interaction with the models. So we kind of have to keep innovating in order to be able to catch up. But our goal has been to basically reduce time to deploy like very sophisticated models from weeks to days, or sometimes for simpler ones to hours.
Okay, so you are looking at those metrics and trying to improve them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Datong, what's your philosophy? I know you said like we're out of the Stone Ages. We're building some of those modules right now. Is it more? Also, is there still? For you, I think the question is probably a little different in the sense that, and I've seen this at very large companies, especially companies which I'm going to say are, were started in the early teens, or like even in the late 2008, 2009 sort of time frame. There is also kind of like resistance, right, to adopt to the new tools because people are using something already. It works. If it works, why do you want to break it, leave it, right? So how is the new module adoption coming along? Is there a philosophy which just states, okay, only use only use the platform for new projects, not for existing projects?
That's a very good question. So I think Reza shares a very good observation. So we always want to buy if there's something available. nobody really want to build something because it actually costs more in terms of money and also time. But when the commercial software is not in that advanced, we still have to build something. So whatever the methodologies and frameworks we're building, for example, when we have the model deployment environment, which is very easy for us, we can deploy the model in one day, get the matrices automatically, collect the matrices within a week or whatever. It depends on how long we want to wait until we get the significant results. Yeah, but it's still, whenever the team is actually looking outside, even we have some system which is supporting this kind of procedure, we probably don't have enough resources to maintain such things and keep developing new versions for this kind of platform. It would be great if another standalone software company which is doing this kind of work keep improving this kind of technologies. And at Yahoo, many teams are open to replace their current frameworks with a better platform. This is for sure.
Got it. Got it. And so let's, which basically means, hey, we're building, we have to build, we have no choice. And we think that the solutions in the market aren't yet there. And as you probably know, there are like, the running joke is there are 9,500 companies who are building these solutions, right? I mean, I think there's some 20 feature store companies, 20 more Drift companies, I don't remember, but quite a few. And of course, I should count ourselves as one of them. What do you see as the biggest kind of like blocker right now? Is it that these companies are still new and young, they don't have enough customers? Is it that they are like not exposed to organizations such as, as large as yourselves? For example, Reza, would you consider maybe like, using a particular company solution for any modules that is out there today? Or is it all like, look, these people are all very early yet still?
So the main issues that we see is not just the size or immaturity of the companies. There are some actually very practical issues that haven't been solved for using this infrastructure. And actually, those are not just limited to ML infra. It's actually even for the mainstream infrastructure. One of the issues is security, because, you have to, so there is some data, you want to run the model, and then you need to share that data if you use a managed solution. And that may be there may be a lot of issues with security and sharing and privacy. That's a major issue. The other issue is compatibility. As I mentioned, for example, we have a specific stack. So we use AWS and we use specific databases and event streaming tools and workflow management. And then, so if there is a tool outside that it's not fully compatible with our stuff and requires that can also cause a lot of overhead and issues. So these are some of the main issues that we look at. And then some of these actually are to some extent influenced by the size and maturity of the vendor. Because, for example, for security, if the vendor is much larger, there's like usually AWS. Less.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So these are like what we observe in terms of, and we look at, and when we are looking at different vendors and the possibility and plausibility of using their tools.
Datong, how do you consider vendors? Is there a specific mod? I mean, what we've seen for to the extent that we've talked to a whole bunch of, at least I would say maybe not as tech forward as you guys, but let's say the Fortune 500 companies. What we note is that over time, data and security, people are getting more confidence around some of those around those processes. They're comfortable because there are a lot of compliance procedures that have been established. There's SOC 2 type 2, which companies can comply with. But what we've also seen modules that they feel more good about or more comfortable with buying over building. A classic example of this is I don't see many people wanting to give up on model hosting
I see a lot more people wanting to do, are okay with data wrangling, data processing, feature store stuff, that's okay. Drift is sometimes okay. So what do you see? Which of the modules would you think of buying, if anything at all?
Well, in terms of buying, there were two types of services. Either a third-party company is providing a service, which we send data to them, they send data to us.
Yeah.
This type of services is definitely triggers security issue. So we need to have an NDA, sign up, and all those security contracts. You're working through this procedure, it takes a little long. You think about if you don't know exactly what that service is, you want to just have a try, and that's rolling up to bring them on board procedure takes too long, then it's actually block this kind of service to be available to the large company. And another type of buying is the software as a service. So they don't actually need your data. Third-party companies provide a software. You install the software into your environment. Either you're in public cloud or you're actually on-prem. And that part is actually it's a little bit easier. But it's still, there's a curve to be on board. You need to install it. So the majority of the company has the infrastructure team which controls all this, assessment, permissions, those things need to be set it up. And the infrastructure team actually bring the software into the either on-prem or on the public cloud, but within the enterprise environment. It also takes quite long. Yeah. So I know the third-party companies, some of the technology is really great, but to be on board, there's definitely a big curve there.
Okay, so you would buy if you can, but there's all these like hurdles for you to get going. Okay, that makes sense. Let's change tack. We've talked quite a bit about like buy versus build, but let's go back to your internal systems. And I don't know if you would like to like rate the 2 or 3 modules which are part of your platform, maybe Reza, which you think are absolutely essential. That what you got right, you were like, look, we built our feature store right, or we built our model hosting right, and maybe like to tell us a little bit about those modules, and also kind of like a little bit, even at a higher level, to the extent you can disclose, what are the details you got right in that platform or that module?
Yeah, so one thing that it's been very important for us from the beginning is to make these systems very flexible and pluggable. Like, for example, the way we design the feature store, pretty much any component of it is very easily, because there are like systems that are pluggable, but it takes like you have to kind of redesign in order to plug in a new module to it. So you very easily plug, like for example, different backend databases, because your requirement may change. And for us, actually, this kind of requirement changes quite rapidly. You may be very growth focused, and then at like 6 months later, you become very cost focused, and that changes the whole equation. So the backend database has to change, and so that's one very important part. You may be very latency sensitive, but you may become very functionality focused. You want to have a feature store that's all more functionality, and you can like do things inside it that it's not just a very simple store. And that's the part that I think we got right. So we built this feature store, which basically not only can sit on different types of databases, but can also sit on different types of external feature stores. So if so it's very flexible in that sense. So in terms of the other part is like building a very functional and flexible workflow management system, because again, workflow management, it's integral part of all the stages of ML, for data cleaning and then training and then running it in the so the same thing we did. So for that one, we are using Airflow, so I can tell that. But we have built a lot of wrappers around it to make it very flexible for this different use cases.
Okay, so the 2 big ones are Workflow and Feature Store. And for Workflow, you're using Airflow. Feature Store, did you build in-house?
So yeah, so we built it in-house, but then we basically using different types of underlying. For example, we use for very low latency situations, we use Redis as the underlying database. And then for the long-term, like high throughput stuff, we just use S3, but we have like our own metadata layer sitting on top of it. And then the other part, which is also really important, for example, for a company like Instacart, is that our regular software engineering and deployment, we have our, existing one. So when we deploy models, we still need to utilize that because there's a lot of work that has been done on that layer. So we don't want to really reinvent that. So we have to build basically a wrapper that can allow us to deploy models using our existing software engineering CI/CD
pipeline. Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah. Any two modules that you got right, Datong? I mean, even in the ads world in Yahoo.
In terms of modules, I think the most important one is actually the model deployment.
Okay.
Because it's more close to the application. So whatever things you do, you need to make sure you can deploy it immediately to get the results. Yeah. But that part is actually relatively easy to solve because you're familiar with your own environments and your workflow control. What is you just manipulate that. So it's relatively easier. If you're going forward a little bit, or you can say backwards a little bit, then the feature store and the feature factory is another component, which is a little bit more complicated and but also necessary. Yeah, I think Reza just shared this need to be flexible. What that actually means is feature store is not a database. You just put some data there and share with other people. That doesn't work. Basically, from the raw data to the features, you explore the dimensions. So you may actually generate thousands of different features from one piece of raw data. So you think about the size of the features could be much, much bigger than your raw data. You think about your raw data is already massive, it's big, then the potential number of features you can generate from that data is even more than that. So feature store is more like a knowledge store, which is you're actually save a lot of feature extraction knowledge into that store. So whenever you need a feature, you can generate it in real time or in a streaming mode or in a batch mode if you're not sensitive to the time. So that part need flexibility because the features which is human being and data scientists in their brain is more coming from their creativity. So we can't really limit the creativity in this world because they are so precious. So to make sure it's flexible enough so everybody can come with even crazy idea to extract some, crazy features, which is still possible, be registered into the store and be extracted and shared through many, many different teams. That's one of the most important stuff. So I know that we can shooting for our comprehensive large platform covers everywhere, but it would be great if we can focus on, our slim or niche area, for example, just make a good feature store available to everybody. It's a good start.
Is that what you're doing?
That's what we're doing today.
And what about the other parts like deployment, drift, etc., that you think is in a good shape?
I think that the other parts are actually in good shape right now. So we're pushing backwards. So moving towards feature store, I think next step after the feature store is being built correctly and easy to use, we'll move backwards to the data.
To the data, okay.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
So, okay, so you guys have built out like deployment stuff. That was easy. You mentioned workflow. You obviously are working on feature store. What do you see as the future? Like, what does the next 2 years look for your roadmaps? I mean, the way we've been thinking about this, inside of Abacus is, yes, let's get the basic parts right. Let's make it flexible, as you mentioned. It's seriously important to do that, but then kick the tires. Have customers use this platform in some way, shape, or form. And, one of the things that we've been very excited about, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is even to date, when all of these modules, you have to basically still take your a model in a notebook. So most data scientists start with a notebook, right? You have to take that model in the notebook and do a lot of work to take out those features, put them in a feature store, do a lot of work to make a Docker container and put that model for hosting and deployment, do a lot of work to engineer the workflow. That's kind of like, if you look at the cloud platforms too, like say AWS SageMaker or Vertex, they're very somewhat similar, in their thought process. And so one of the things that we've really thought about or thinking about right now, and I wanted to get your perspective, is what if I could take my notebook and in 2 hours, I could actually wrap it in something, in some functions, which some part of the code would run on Redis, some part of the code would run on your, a TensorFlow serving, some part of the code would run on data cleansing. Can I convert my notebook to a production model, right? I don't know if you guys have thought about that, or do data scientists even start with notebooks in your world? I mean, mostly they do in my experience, but curious about that. So from notebook to production, what does that futuristic flow look like?
Yes, so we do exactly that. So yeah, pretty much everyone is using notebooks. Now there are more advanced notebooks, they're shareable, they're more, enterprise grade. But then that's exactly, a part of our product line that allows people basically to take that same notebook and productionize it. So that's one of the areas that we are working on. And then to be honest with you, in the next 2-3 years future, I think there's so much progress in this area that it's very, very difficult to really know or predict what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot more interesting automation that comes our way in terms of modernizing and automating the feature engineering process and making it super simple and intuitive, and that obviously is going to change the whole way that the ML is done. So I think we are seeing a lot of interesting ideas and concepts that are coming. Basically, they are still at the idea stage, but I think they will be productionized over the next 2-3 years, and that's going to change the landscape quite dramatically.
Any thoughts in the future, Datong?
I thought you more mentioned about model deployments from the notebook to the production. I think most of the data scientists understand why they're using notebook, because it's more flexible. It's very informal. You can try different ideas in parallel. But in terms of productionize, you definitely need to standardize the one pipeline, right? You can't just have multiple ideas and you want to try any of them and put them into production. It doesn't make any sense. So there is one procedure. You have to simplify your clean up your notebook, make sure it is suitable for production deployment. I don't see any automated way you can do this. Definitely human need to do this.
You should come to our workshop. We'll show you.
Okay.
Just joking.
But once you clean up your notebook, definitely you have only one thread of a pipeline to deploy. I'm expecting we already have some tools which can help people to deploy in that stage. If there is a better offers in the markets, we'd like to try. That's definitely something can be commercialized for sure.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't I'm just looking at some of the questions out here. I think we're almost on time, on time in terms, like any kind of like, I'm going to wrap with one question, I think, which is not necessarily from the audience, but I think something which we can wrap the session with is, what is, like, if you were to start all over again, what would you do? What would you start building? Like, you guys obviously have built for the last few years, in some cases, maybe over a decade. You're starting a company now, you've got some data, enough data to start build a model. Would you start building a platform first, or would you just let the models be and then think about platform after you've gotten traction? So how would you go about it if you're a new company? And we can
as you said, hindsight is 20/20. So obviously, it's, if you know already what you need, you want to build that platform. But in my opinion, it's usually kind of an iterative process. So you start with some applications, and like, this is the platform that I need in order to start this like minimum set of applications. But then you always think with a couple of things in mind, that the system that you build is flexible enough and scalable enough, so you don't have to go back and redesign the whole thing as you're coming up with new applications and new use cases. And that's pretty difficult to do, because you cannot really think of all these different dimensions of that you have to be flexible across. But that would be pretty much the blueprint.
Well, I think there's a difference between you buying things and you're building things. So if you're buying things, and the things is already available there, so you know how much you're going to pay, and you roughly know how much you're going to get. And it's an easy decision. But if you're building things, you need to think about the investment and the return, right? If you set up a company, you only have one application, are you thinking about the first invest building a platform, or you just focus on your application? I think the answer is clear, right? Nobody is going to do a platform first and using a platform just to build one application. It doesn't sound correct. So it'll be great if something available, if you want to buy, it is there. If the platform is there, it's not very expensive, you can afford it with your investments, go ahead and try. Buy it. It's much easier. So even going back, we still have to do this kind of recursive stuff, building focus on the application first, for sure.
Application first, agreed. Platform always is an enabler. Okay, thank you both for coming to the session. I see that the participants for the next session are, and I think it's going to be a really exciting session. So thank you, and we'll introduce our panelists and our moderator very shortly after this.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.